Hey, my name is Adrian Jules, and from 2017 until March of 2020, I worked as a security guard at the Chateau Marmont, the castle on the Sunset Strip, this historic establishment frequented by A-list celebrities. It was a place to, go and unwind, and it was a very private situation where you could just let loose. And for myself and other employees who worked there, it was a very toxic environment, riddled in racism, riddled in sexual harassment, riddled in being disrespected by your peers in management and guests. And of course, not everybody that worked there was a terrible person. I met some amazing people there who, when I was going through what I was going through, were there for me. You will remain unnamed because I don't want them to attack you like they have attacked me. By they, we'll learn who they are. In terms of my experiences there, look, I've been called everything outside of my name working at the Chateau. I've been called the N-word. I had a female hostess call me a bitch and say I was acting like a bitch. Reported it to HR, to management. Nothing ever happened. Somebody called me a moon cricket once, and that was new for me. I was, whoa, moon cricket? What the? How'd you even come up? Like, what is that? So I Googled it, and I was like, all right, hadn't heard that one. We had something called chocolate sundaes. Now, there was a staff of about 250 people there. It was a hotel, so you have different departments: housekeeping, a valet, bellman, houseman, front desk. And out of that 250, there might have been maybe 8 to 10 black people. And on Sunday, every black person was scheduled to work, so we would all show up and work together. And on the restaurant menu, it was fried chicken. Every Sunday, they served fried chicken and cornbread. I was like, nobody else is seeing this? Is this not odd to anyone else? But I realized I was expendable. And when you work somewhere, man, I understand that I'm just a number, but I knew how different it was at the Chateau in that they treated black celebrities and celebrities of color with so much disdain and so much disrespect that I was like, damn, if they can treat these people like this, then definitely don't give a damn about me. I've had to say things in defense of these people, and not that I'm a martyr by any stretch of the imagination. I just don't like seeing people being mistreated. When I would, hear that a black couple got turned away who just wanted drinks for no reason outside of they didn't want them in there because they didn't fit the aesthetic. By they, I mean the Chateau Marmont. It would bother me, and I'd bring a lot of stuff up to management, which is why they probably hate me. But I mean, let's just, like, we're all human beings, man. Like, we share this space together. What makes you think that I can't come into this establishment and have a drink? It's an odd thing. One time with Quinta, true story, she doesn't know this happened. She was walking up the sidewalk, and one of the hostess that was at the end of the driveway said underneath her breath, I hope she doesn't think she's getting in here. And I was like, what the? At this point, I knew who Quinta was based on the BuzzFeed videos, but even if I didn't, she was well dressed and she was cool. So I rushed toward her and I pulled out my reservation list and I checked it, and she gave me a name, and she was joining someone that was there having dinner. And I walked her past the hostess up to the stairs, and I know she probably thought this guy is crazy, or either he's trying to talk to me. It's like, nah, it's neither, actually. I just didn't want her to deal with what she was going to have to deal with, and that was just a common thing. We had a party for Fences, the movie, starring Denzel Washington and Viola Davis, and I was excited because I'm like, yo, I get to meet Denzel, and I met him, and he was super cool. And I remember walking in the back office just before the party got going, and I heard the hostess, the older white woman who had been there for years, she say to management, Amanda and Carly, oh, it's gonna be one of those nights. I hope nobody gets shot or smokes weed tonight. At the Fences premiere? Who's gonna get shot at the Fences premiere? And so what? I don't care if the whole room was smoking weed. There's somebody snorting cocaine in the bathroom right now. Like, what? It was just, anytime there was a collective of black people there, or a group of black people, the attitudes within the building from management was crazy. I'm like, so you took the money, but you don't want these people here? That was like always mind-boggling. One time, the restaurant managers told me to go tell Dave Chappelle and a group of his comedy buddies, Marlon Wayans was at the table, Dave Chappelle, it was a few other people, that they need to keep it down in the restaurant. And I'm like, The restaurant is loud as hell. There's a pianist in the restaurant. People are talking all over the place. You want me to go tell a group of black people that they need to be quiet? Are you crazy? Do you understand the optics of that? And again, you're concerned about Dave Chappelle being loud. Hey, there's a guy doing cocaine off the table. Like, they just went out of their way to bother black people. And that bothered me, man. Because it's like you're doing way too much and you don't have to, but you don't treat everybody like this. Just stop being racist. I have a funny Michael B. Jordan story. And full disclaimer, whenever Michael B. Jordan was at the Chateau, super pleasant guy, super down to earth, no issues with him. So this isn't a shot at him. It's not a shot at all. But it's something that happened at work. I was at the end of the driveway with a bellman and a hostess. I went to the restroom momentarily. And when I come back, you know, tongue in cheek, I jokingly asked a bellman, white guy who is hilarious. You ever meet a person who doesn't mince their words and says exactly what's on their mind? This bellman, he would just say what he was thinking. So jokingly, I come back from using the restroom. It might have been 2 minutes. And I say, did I miss anything? And he says, nah, the same old, same old. The restaurant just turned away a nice looking couple who just wanted to have drinks. And I was like, damn. He was like, damn is right, Adrian. Because the Chateau makes it seem as though they like black people in their establishment when we all know they don't. This is a white dude saying this. And I'm like, yeah, no, you're right. But, I mean, they do like Michael B. Jordan. He says, have you seen Michael B. Jordan? Everybody likes Michael B. Jordan. But if it was, let's say, Michael C. Jordan, a black accountant who wanted to have dinner, he'd be out of gas. In that moment, he was as honest as he was, as transparent as he was. But even as a white guy, he too knew what was going on within the walls of that establishment. So kudos to you, sir. You know exactly who you are. That's one of the best stories that I have about that place. It was something else. And we will delve into what that something else is and my experience. But overall, just a really bad place to work for your mental health with really bad people running it. And we'll dive further into that, so stay tuned. So before I dive into this, I just want to, put out a disclaimer. This isn't an attack on anybody. I'm merely explaining what happened to me, and that's it. I released a video not too long ago. I had people coming into my inbox on social media and thanking me for being brave and also sharing their experiences with me. So that kind of, gave me the courage. I hate that I have to qualify what I'm doing because I just feel weak. I'm gonna be honest with you. I just feel weak. The incident that occurred happened in October of 2019. It was about 1:32 in the morning. I was working at the Chateau Marmont. My job was to ensure that, non-hotel guests didn't get into the hotel at that time to disturb the peace. Homelessness, anybody who didn't belong there. Because again, celebrities stayed there quite often. So you had to ensure anyone showing up at like 1 in the morning was a hotel guest or visiting a hotel guest. So I'm downstairs with this hostess, and she was part of the 8 to 10 black people who worked there. And she's just like a motherly figure, and she knows exactly who she is, and I love you for it. You really helped me through a lot of things. But anyway, so a hostess by the name of Magdalene Vick walks downstairs, and she has a cup in her hand, and she's like, hey, Adrian, can you drive me up to the hill? Now, employees would park behind the hotel up the hill because we had a designated parking garage that you had to pay $6 every day to park in, but people didn't want to pay the $6, so they would park behind the hotel. And 1:32 in the morning is dark. No one wants to walk to their vehicle alone at that time. So as a courtesy, security, we would drive them up to their vehicles, not because we had to, but because, as a courtesy. I told her that I couldn't leave the hostess that I was with alone, but my security supervisor, Shane, was on break, and I said, once he comes back from break to relieve me, I'll drive you up to your vehicle. Look, I don't know what she was going through in that moment. When I say she lost it, I'm talking about she went full on Karen. She turned red in the face as she was yelling. Spit was coming out of her mouth. Her eyes were bulging out. She told me that I needed to do my damn job, and it makes her feel like shit every time she has to request that I and security just do our jobs and a host of other things. And I understand de-escalation is a part of my job. So in an effort to de-escalate, I said calmly, well, me using my personal vehicle to drive you to your personal vehicle isn't a part of my job requirement, because if you think about it, if I get in an accident, then the Chateau Marmont will say that I was acting outside of my job duties and I will be held responsible. It's a courtesy that we don't have to do. And she insisted that it, in fact, was my job and that I wasn't doing it, and that she would take it up with management, and that if I don't think anything will happen, I'll see, is what she said to me. And I was like, it's crazy, because I said yes to you. The hostess that I'm with intervenes and says, well, Magdalene, it's not their job. Like, they do it out of the kindness of their heart, but they don't have to do it. She wasn't trying to hear that. She stormed up the driveway, and I was like, woo. So after Magdalene stormed off, the hostess, asked me if I was okay. I was like, that was a lot. So a few minutes after that, I get a text. And I'm like, who is texting me this late, man? Like, I check my text messages, and from Magdalene, she sent me a picture of a used condom and asked that I show a little more compassion. So when my supervisor comes off his break, I tell him what happened. Shane, he says that's unacceptable, and he'll talk to management about it. So then I go up to the restaurant, and I speak to Magdalene's manager, who was finishing paperwork. The restaurant was closed. I show him a picture of the condom. I show him the text message, and I say, man, this makes me very uncomfortable, and this isn't a good thing. I don't appreciate receiving this. He says to me that Magdalene posted a skit or sketch on social media, and it didn't get the response that she thought it would get, and she's having a bad day, so to just give her a break. I'm sorry. I just explained my discomfort to you. I showed you what she sent me, and I said, okay, let's just, just for the sake of doing it, let's role reverse. Let's say I sent her a picture of a used condom with a ambiguous text message. Would you respond the way that you're responding? He stared at me, said, I'm sorry, bud, put his head down, and went back to doing his work. And I was like, all right, so you just want me to let this slide. So I clock out, I go home, because my shift ended like 30 minutes after. And as I'm driving home, I'm just thinking about it. And I'm like, that text message and that condom picture is ambiguous as hell. And if you don't know the full context, you can deduce, or you might deduce, that I did something to this girl. So I text my supervisor, Shane, and I'm like, yo, that text was sexual harassment and it was unwarranted. And he's like, you think so? I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? Yes. I expressed why it was so personal to me. Well, my mother is a victim of sexual assault. And as a result, I was conceived through that sexual assault. So I'm a product of it. So I'm hypersensitive to those type of circumstances, and I would never put a woman or anyone in a position where something like that could happen to her. And it just started to really mess with my mental, because I didn't know what she was saying, like what she was alleging. Was she alleging that I R-worded her if I put her in a position to be assaulted? And it was just a dangerous text message to send. So he says that he'll take it up the ladder and it was inappropriate, and he'll follow up with management. A few days later, I reached back out because I hadn't heard anything from him. And he says that, he spoke to Molly Kelly, who's the food and beverages director. And she confirmed that it wasn't our job to walk anyone up to their vehicles. And I'm like, well, I knew that, but we also drive them up. I know we shouldn't be doing that. I say, what about the Magdalene situation? He said, well, that's all the information I have. So I decide, I'm going to submit a formal complaint. And that's what I do. I submit a complaint to incident report, to HR, the HR director at the time, Annalise Newman, who was also the personal assistant to Amanda Gradnetti, the hotel GM, and Carly Skinner, a manager at the hotel. And that conflict always bothered me, because I would always say to myself, what if I have a grievance or a complaint against Amanda or Carly? I would be taking that grievance to their personal assistant, who's also cosplaying as the HR coordinator. So I submit my formal complaint to HR. Annalise never responds. One day, Amanda Gradnetti, the GM, is walking up the driveway, and I pull her to the side, and I express my discomfort and what happened. She says, yes, I know. We're investigating it. I'm like, all right, that's a sign of relief, because I haven't heard anything from anybody. She's like, yeah, bullying is a very serious accusation, Adrian, and we're really looking into it. And I was like, bullying? What do you mean bullying? She said, well, Magdalene has brought it to our attention that you have been bullying and intimidating her, and she feels as though you endanger women at work. And I was like, whoa, what? So I say, well, what about my incident with the used condom and the text messages and her going off on me? And Amanda says, well, I don't know anything about that, so you're more than welcome to forward it to me. and I forward her the email that I sent to HR. But at this point, I'm like, yo, this young lady just falsely accused me. And the thing about a rumor at the Chateau Marmont is it spreads like wildfire. As an actor, as a writer, it's tough enough to break into Hollywood, but to have a claim like that against you, I'm talking about we're in the peak of the Me Too movement. I was like, this ends me. I don't have a career to be Me Too'd yet, but I'm being Me Too'd, and this isn't a joke. And I'm just like, damn. So at this point, my mind is like, whoa, this is crazy. But also, if she can accuse me of that, she can accuse me of far worse. And it's like, people are like, well, if you didn't do anything, you have nothing to worry about. That's not how this works. Magdalene was able to get very far with the false accusation. So imagine if she made that accusation. And I don't get the benefit of doubt. Like, as I'm a black man in America, I understand people hate the race card. But one thing that I've realized is it's tough to overlook race in some scenarios. And this is one of them. People are starting to walk past me and giving me the side eye. And it was happening a few days prior to me finding out that I had been accused of bullying, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I just figured people are wishy-washy like that. One minute they rock with you, the next they don't. But it was because they were under the impression that I intimidate and bully and make women feel uncomfortable and safe. And I had a well-known producer, big-time producer, white, who came up to me. He's like, Adrian, man, I heard about what's going on with the Magdalene situation. I don't know if you're willing to share, but I just want to get your side because I never saw you that way, and I don't believe it, but I just want to hear from you. And I was like, you know about it? And he was like, yeah. I was like, oh, shit. So that means other people know about it in the industry, and it's a lie. But before the truth is told, the lie will reign as truth, and I'm fucked. On the record, just because I think it's important, I never had any inappropriate interactions with Magdalene or any woman that I drove up the hill. So that happened, man, and I'm just freaking out because I got a false accusation looming against me. I have industry individuals who are important in the business. They now think that I'm a bully. I have my peers at work who think that I bully women. And again, I had some people that worked there, not in management. It was a sisterhood that I hadn't seen. They all got together and they victimized Magdalene. They gave her a parking spot in the employee garage. She needed to be protected. And they villainized Adrian Jules. They never sat down with me. They never investigated my claim. They didn't care about it. And here I am, like, mentally just in a funk. Like, the little career that I had built up, I was like, it's toast. It's done for. But also just my reputation as a man. I understood all that I had in this world was my reputation and my namesake. So outwardly try to ruin it wasn't good. It was really bad for me. And there was a circumstance that pushed me over the edge. So the hostess that I was with the night the situation with Magdalene happened, we were working together one day and she came back from her break and she just looked as though she saw a ghost. And I was like, hey, was everything okay? What's wrong with you? She said, Magdalene just approached me in the break room and she said, I know you heard what happened. And as women, we have to stick together. And she was like, that troubles me because I have nephews who are black. I have cousins who are black men. And I knew that she had lied on you. And I just don't know how to respond. And I was like, she is going to end me even though I don't need to be or deserve to be ended. And what was even scarier is that Magdalene had done a podcast speaking about an experience where, she felt as though she was being taken advantage of by somebody she was dating. And it was a podcast. It was public. So I was like, the last thing I need is for her to go out and tell this story that isn't true. And there's so much going on up top. The mind can be a very dangerous thing. The mind can be your worst enemy. And in that case, it was my worst enemy because I was like, this woman is going to say that I sexually assaulted or harassed her. She's lied on me before. And that's kind of where my mind went. So at this point, the rumor is that I am a bully. I intimidate and endanger women. That's the rumor that Magdalene started, and that's spreading around the hotel. Behind the scenes, she's sending me text messages apologizing about lashing out and hoping that I forgive her. But when she's speaking with management, I am this big bad bully who she's afraid of. That's just a dangerous rhetoric and a dangerous person to have to work with. Someone who will apologize to you but then go to management and doubled down on you being a bully and harassing and endangering her. And I come to work like a week or so later, and I'm told to come to a hotel room. So as I'm walking up the stairs, something tells me to hit record on my phone, because at that point I don't trust anybody. And I walk in this room, and in this room is Amanda Gradnetti, the GM, Molly Kelly, the food and beverages director, Dennis, who is my supervisor and a hotel manager, Shane, the head of the security department, and across is Magdalene Vick, the woman who falsely accused me. So I walk in this meeting, and I immediately say to Dennis, "Hey man, I'm uncomfortable." And he says, "I know." And Amanda intervenes, and she asks me what's going on, and I say, "Well, I'm uncomfortable being here." And she dismisses it, and the meeting continues. And in that meeting, management at that point learns that Magdalene lied about the entire thing. Everything was finally exposed, and I'm gonna play the recording. In that recording, you hear Amanda say that no one's taking notes and this is an informal meeting. And I was like, how can a meeting about bullying and sexual harassment be informal? And the not taking notes thing is very important, because Molly Kelly then gave the Chateau's attorneys in their legal firm meeting notes that were never taken in the meeting, because she didn't have a pen. She never wrote anything. In fact, I was told notes weren't being taken. So because they were being taken, according to them, I took my own notes via recording it. She said that I agreed to move forward. Essentially, I consented to move forward with the meeting. And I said, well, that's a lie. Meeting should have been adjourned the moment I said I was uncomfortable. If the roles were reversed, they would have adjourned the meeting, but I didn't get that type of grace, and I never got that kind of grace at the Chateau Marmont.
I feel like, so as in all seriousness, Adrian, like I had a very good conversation with Maggie, and I expected the same of this. If it's not going to go that way, then that is what it is. You don't have to like each other. You don't even have to respect each other. But if we're all going to work in the same environment, then I think the air needs to be cleared, and that's why this, as I said to Maggie, this is not being recorded. It's not a disciplinary proceeding at all. It's a conversation between 6 adults.
The night that you went off on me, Maggie, literally you went off for no reason. My issue with it is, prior to you going off, I told you I would take you up to your car. I said yes, but I also said that I can't leave Miss here by herself because other guys are on break. So there was a yes out the gate. So to go off on me like that made me uncomfortable. But then to subtly, you said that you would call a meeting, and I said, well, if you call a meeting, you're going to tell you it's not my job to walk you up to your car. And you told me, okay, you think nothing's going to happen? You'll see. This is why it's personal for me. My mother was raped, and I was conceived through rape. So if anybody has compassion for anything like that, it's me, which is why I said yes to you. You said no, you would walk up the hill after I said yes. So to send me that picture was completely out of line. Like, I would never send anything like that to anybody. I don't joke around. I don't make inappropriate jokes at work. I'm very professional. You just can't go around and say people do things that they don't do. I also take that very seriously. I would never accuse you of doing something that you don't do. I did nothing to you for you to say these things about me or for you to send me that picture. I'm going to be uncomfortable for a while because this is personal to me. There's a story behind why I feel the way I feel. I'm not blowing this out of proportion. There's a real reason why I feel the way I feel. So
that's fair. I think that's very fair, and you're under no obligation whatsoever to walk Maggie anywhere, to interact other than on a professional level. And then really it's up to you. Like, I'm the one that called this meeting based on your comments and based on our conversation when I left the hotel, and because I take everything seriously. So then if you want to take it further, Adrian, that's within your right. But I haven't gone on record with Maggie. I didn't understand the personal nature of it. Perhaps I would have handled it differently had I known.
You're really, really, really awesome, and it can take you however long it takes you to get through it. It's fine, because I know that you're gonna take this and be better, and you're gonna put it in your work, and then hopefully you can find the ability to forgive me.
I'm sorry, Adrian. I had no idea.
After the meeting was adjourned, they apologized a bunch. By they, Amanda, Dennis, management said they were sorry. Amanda asked how I wanted it handled, and I was like, well, you're management. Why are you asking me how you should handle this situation? There's an employee handbook that speaks to how you handle these kind of circumstances as it pertains to sexual harassment. And again, it kind of went away. And a few weeks later, Dennis, hotel manager, approaches me and says, hey, Amanda and Carly won't stop emailing me about speaking to you about your mental health. They want to plan a meeting to discuss your mental health. And I say, what? Are they medical professionals? Are they qualified to discuss my mental health? Why would they need to speak about my mental health? And he says, I told him this, Adrian. I also told him that we haven't treated any other employees this way. I can't understand why we're doing this to Adrian. And to Dennis's credit, he showed me communications in which he was just really troubled by what they were trying to do, but they weren't listening. Amanda and Carly were on a mission to essentially paint me as crazy, because if they were able to do that, then the claims that I did have and the circumstance could go away in it as a whole, because Adrian, he's just a crazy black man with mental health problems. Meanwhile, I haven't had any mental health problems up until that point. I was just a happy-go-lucky guy, like always smiling, always in a good mood. I was an optimist, man. I was happy about living, and that changed after everything that I went through. So that is what happened. That was, we would call this the inciting incident in a script. So I mentioned Carly Skinner in the last video, and she was a hotel manager, but I didn't deal with Carly. She's a very dishonest person, and we had a circumstance that ruined our working relationship because she outright lied to me. There was a situation in December 31st, 2017. I was doing a off-property run for the hotel where if a guest requests something that isn't at the hotel, a bellman or security, we would drive to wherever we needed to drive to go pick it up. So in this case, I was picking up glasses for hotel guests, and the hotel approved it, and we as employees would use our personal vehicles. So on the way to go pick up these glasses, I got in a car accident, and my car was totaled. And when I got back to the hotel, Carly said that the hotel would take care of everything and I didn't have to worry about anything regarding my car, but I needed a rental. So I went and got a rental, and she approved it and said, and Amanda also approved it and said, they said, just bring a receipt and we'll reimburse you. So I had this rental for like 2 weeks, and it was costing me a gang of money because I'm paying out of pocket. I submitted the receipts, and Carly calls me into her office and says, hey, I got your email receipts, but after speaking to Paul Deeming, who is an executive at the Chateau Marmont, the hotel isn't liable for what happened, so we can't reimburse you, and also we can't cover any damages to your car. And I said, excuse me? You literally told me the hotel would cover everything. Also, I was at work when this happened, and I was doing a run for a hotel guest while on the clock. The hotel is 1000% responsible. So there was a bit of back and forth, and them telling me they weren't going to cover anything. And oddly enough, she never started a workers' compensation claim, and I got in a car accident. And that's important because later down the line, you'll learn that she filed a fraudulent workers' compensation claim about a mental health incident. So I ended up having to escalate the matter. And Amanda at some point intervened and said, hey, I spoke to upper management and they said, we will cover everything. And so after that, I said, I'm good off of Carly, but I was also good off of the Chateau as well, because I mean, who just blatantly lies like that and refuses to, take accountability? Like, I could have died in that car accident. So after that happened, I couldn't rock with her at all. And even after the ambush meeting where, I told Amanda in management that I wasn't comfortable being in the same room with Magdalene, and I wasn't comfortable. Carly, who wasn't in the meeting, because again, at this point, Amanda knew that her and I just didn't see eye to eye. She comes on a thread and says that no one accused me of bullying. And I'm like, there was an entire ambush meeting centered on me bullying this woman, and I didn't bully her. So she didn't even know what happened in the meeting. But again, that's the Chateau Marmont, very unorganized. Nobody passes on messages unless it's to lie and deprive people of justice and equality. That's the operative word, equality. And the workers' compensation thing, I missed a few days from work during the situation with Magdalene. I was just very stressed, and I gave Dennis a medical note from a therapist that I had seen, to excuse my absence. Not that I needed to, because I hadn't missed a legal amount of days to warrant a doctor's note. But the Chateau was starting to retaliate and do little things to me. And so I said, I'm just going to cover my bases. I gave him the note for that reason. So Carly Skinner and Annalise Newman got their hands on that note, and they opened up a workers' compensation claim with that medical note and indicated something that wasn't on the medical note in the claim, they attributed my diagnosis on the note to work-related activities. So I'm just going to tell you what the diagnosis was. It was acute stress disorder. One, that's crazy, because who are you to say that? That is, the medical note doesn't say that. How dare you do that? Two, they listed on the compensation claim an injury on a date that I wasn't even at work. So I wasn't even at work when they said that I got injured. So they lied about the diagnosis. They lied about me being at work on that day. And Carly forged Dennis's name on the document, because when I learned that this claim had been opened a month and a half later, I went to Dennis and I said, dude, why would you open a workers' compensation claim absent my knowledge if it was to benefit me, and use a doctor's note to excuse an absence? And he was like, Adrian, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I thought he was bluffing. And I was like, dude, so I showed him the document. Said, this is your name. He said, Adrian, check out the date. I was off that date. I had nothing to do with this. And I looked at him and I could see that he was telling the truth. And I was like, so you mean to tell me HR and Carly forged your name on a document? He said, it seems that way. I said, wow. But again, the goal was to paint me as crazy. So Carly, when she called me into her office to tell me that this claim was open, she only told me about it because Sampo International, the workers' comp company, was going to close the claim due to inactivity. So she brings it up to me and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't open up a claim. She said, oh yes, well, we opened up this claim because of, the mental health issues that you said you were having. I said, huh? She said, well, you gave Dennis a note. I said, I gave him a note to excuse an absence. And on that note, it says nothing about work anything. Wait, you guys used that note to start the claim? And then she realized, she's like, how many days did you miss? I said, I missed 2. She was like, oh. You don't even meet the requirements for a claim. Well, you might still need to be cleared by our doctors and our physicians. I said, no, we're not doing that. No, we're not. There's no reason to clear me. I'm just fine. If anybody needs a mental health evaluation, it was a woman who was yelling at me at the top of her lungs at 2 a.m. and falsely accused me at work. So she said, okay, I'll just close it. And I was like, well, maybe not. And that maybe not is gonna go into this next video, because you'll learn what happened with the workers' compensation company. It's a mess. It's a soap opera. Carly Skinner told me about the workers' compensation claim on a Sunday. That Monday, 9 a.m. I woke up and I called Sampo International and I got in touch with the adjuster who was on the case. And she said, hey, Mr. Jules, I hear that you want to close the case. I just received an email from Carly. I said, whoa. I just learned about the case yesterday. And she said, I beg your pardon? She said, but you initiated the claim. I said, I ain't initiate shit. I just learned about this yesterday and it was opened over a month ago. She said, that's strange. I was under the impression that you knew. I said, no, but it would have been beneficial since it was for my benefit and to help me, right? She said, yes. I said, so can you send me the documents, all of them? The claim, the documents used to open up the workers' compensation claim? And she got quiet. She says, yes, I'll email you over the documents. So I say, okay. And she said she'd email them that day, end of the day. And I was like, that shouldn't take that long to send emails. Anyway, I wait till the end of the day, don't get an email. A few days later, I don't get an email. I call her a few times. I leave voicemails. I email her. She's not responding. She's literally ignoring me. And she finally comes back on the email thread and she says that she can't give me the documents used or the documents pertaining to my claim, and that my employer might be able to give them to me. What do you mean might? This claim was open with you, the company, and it is for me. So why can't you give me my documents? So she mails me a blank workers' compensation packet that would need to be filled out, literally sends this in the mail. So I email her and I say, you literally sent me a blank package. You haven't sent me anything pertaining to my claim. And what I now know is they didn't want to assume any liability, because she learned that the doctor's note used was a doctor's note used to excuse my absence that I knew nothing about, but also it mentioned nothing about my stress being as a result of work activities, but also, again, being falsely accused by a woman and dealing with that isn't a work activity. I mean, where do you work at? But again, it is a Chateau, so it's on brand. Yeah, that's pretty much what happened with Sampo International. Like, they stopped responding to me. They refused to give me the documents used to start my claim. The mastermind behind this was Carly Skinner, who has gone on. I hear she's now the general manager of a hotel, I believe somewhere in the Carolinas. Annalise Newman is moved on to, is it Amazon? Amanda Granetti is back at the Chateau Marmont. Dennis Shane back at the Chateau Marmont. So everybody kind of went on with their lives, and I'm still in court, seeking justice and seeking freedom. Because once you're accused, like, nobody cares about the truth. If the lie is entertaining and it makes sense, if they can make a narrative fit, by they I mean people, it's an uphill battle. So that's what happened with Sampo International. So at this point, everything has hit the fan. The hotel is definitely retaliating. I got my vacation time approved from Dennis. I ended up working the holidays, so I worked Christmas, all of the major holidays, Thanksgiving. I ended up working those and relieving guys for their vacation because I wanted to go home in the new year. So Dennis approved my vacation time, and Amanda came back on an email thread and singled me out and said that I was taking a vacation during a blackout period, and that this was a violation of company policy, and that this would be documented on my personnel file. At that time, though, there were tons of other staff currently on vacation, including Magdalene Vick. So they were retaliating. So I ended up not going home to visit my mom. I'm an only child, so I see my mom quite frequently. So I ended up canceling my trip, and I was like, that's crazy. I ended up retaining counsel. My counsel got in touch with the Chateau's counsel, and before we did, we spoke to several attorneys who represented the Chateau Marmont. Andre Balazs has tons of attorneys on retainer, but we ended up getting in touch with the attorneys at Pillsbury Law, Paula Weber and Alexander Morton. Paula Weber was a partner in the point of contact, and from the gate, she said that nothing happened to me. It was just a heated situation, and that Magdalene apologized. And I'm like, wait, all you have to do to get off with sexually harassing somebody is say I'm sorry? So she denied that anything happened to me, any wrongdoing. What she didn't know is I had a whole recording of management apologizing and all the wrongdoing, and other recordings, because again, I had to take certain measures to ensure that I protected myself, because it was them versus me, and them is the machine. The machine is the Chateau Marmont and Andre Balazs, and they have access to the top lawyers and the top firms, and they have access to the media. So I had to take the necessary steps to protect me, and I did that. There was a point where I had a conversation with Dennis, and to his credit, he was honest with me. He said, hey, I spoke to the Chateau's attorneys, and they asked me if in that meeting, was it an ambush meeting, and did you in fact indicate that you were uncomfortable? And I told them, yes, that you were uncomfortable and you didn't know about the meeting, so it was an ambush meeting. But he said, nobody listens to me, Adrian. And I was like, well, kudos to you for just being honest and even taking that chance. I do appreciate that. I wish things had gone differently. In March of 2020, Andre Balazs fires the entire staff at the Chateau Marmont, lays everybody off. He fired everybody. And he cites the pandemic as a reasoning. And a few months later, my attorney and I filed the complaint in the Southern District in New York. And you're going to say, wait, why'd you sue them in New York if you worked in LA? So after everybody got fired, the Chateau's counsel indicated that everybody that worked there and had a hand in what happened to me are now third parties, and they don't have access to them anymore. And I said, well, I knew Amanda was still working there, so that's a lie, but I also knew Shane was working there. But they kept denying that they had access to these people. And so because I had claims against Andre Balazs as well, personal claims, and he was a resident of New York, we sued in New York as a result and not LA. That was the reasoning. So my attorney sent Paula a courtesy copy of the complaint. She forwarded it to Andre Balazs, but she didn't remove my counsel off the email thread. So Andre Balazs comes back on the email and he says, make this shit go away. And my counsel now has this email thread, and it blows everything up because Paula realizes she made a grave mistake in not removing my counsel. And now he has an email thread with Andre Balazs saying to make this shit go away after they had gone to the media. By they, I mean the Chateau and Andre had gone to the media and said they investigate all employee discrimination claims and claims of sexual harassment. So they had gone on the record and said things, but behind the scenes, he was saying to make this shit go away. About 2 months before we all were let go as staff in March, I had an unfortunate incident with owner Andre Balazs that involved sexual harassment and groping. And And had I not responded in creating distance, I'm sure it would have gotten a lot worse, or we would have tried to do something far worse. In the moment that it happened, my initial thought was to defend myself and respond with the rage that I was feeling inside. But I knew I had already been going through what I was going through with the Chateau Marmont in terms of them saying that nothing happened to me at work. Had I responded with the rage and the anger that I had, in me at that moment, it would have been really bad for me, and that I would have probably ended up under the jail. And so I didn't say anything. I just allowed for it to eat at me on the inside. And yeah, the plan was always to amend my complaint to put the more graphic details in them. My attorney didn't want to put it in from the jump because he didn't know how court was going to go in terms of when a hearing would be scheduled, when the judge would schedule notices. Because again, the world was closed down. It was a pandemic. Like, nothing was happening. The world was shut down. So he didn't want that information out there, and my safety in jeopardy. So he said, we'll amend the complaint and we'll add these complaints once we get in court and we get things going. We were appointed Judge Lorna Schofield. She was appointed by President Barack Obama, first president I ever voted for. The irony of that. So Judge Schofield was our judge, and representing Andre Balaz in New York was David Greenhouse of Jackson Lewis. What he ended up requesting is that I go back to arbitration to arbitrate my claims because I signed an arbitration agreement as a term of employment. A representative never executed the agreement, so my signature was on it, so I never received a fully executed agreement from them. But Judge Lorna said that I need to go arbitrate the claims that I can arbitrate, and essentially whatever isn't arbitrated, we come back to court and we deal with in court. I didn't want to go to arbitration because I had civil rights claims of harassment. I knew what arbitration was, but nonetheless, I did. And in this process, I ended up going on the record and speaking about my experience with Hollywood reporter Gary Baum. And I did so because, after speaking to him, I got a genuine sense that he was trying to tell an honest story about the toxic workplace that is the Chateau Marmont. And he wanted to be a voice for the employees. And I had been approached by several other publications, but I never wanted to be a part of just salacious headlines and clickbait. But when I spoke to him, and I had a few employees who had gone on the record and said, we feel good about him, Adrian, you should tell your story. And I did. In that article with the Hollywood Reporter, put a bigger bullseye on my back, in which the Chateau Marmont now saw me as like enemy number one, because how dare I go public with my claims. We end up going to JAMS arbitration. You will learn more about that process in the next video. It's tough to talk about because, as a man, you're taught to protect yourself and to man up. And as security, it was my job to protect people and property. So imagine me being in a position where I have to protect myself. And I do what I have to do to get out of the situation so that it doesn't go further, but I don't protect myself. I don't do what my instinct is telling me to do. And that troubles me. And I beat myself up about it. I allowed evil to win that day. And that's at least how I take it. Yeah. And during all of this, I was taking my mental health very seriously. And what I've learned in this process is there's not a safe space for Black men to really discuss our mental health. And it's often discounted, and nobody takes our mental health seriously. And so we have to, fellas. I ended up signing up with Cerebral, and Cerebral was my mental health provider. Just stay tuned. What is arbitration? Arbitration is a formal method of alternative dispute resolution involving a neutral third party. I don't think anybody at JAMS is neutral. I know for certain my arbitrator, Mr. Hiro Aragaki, a professor of law at UC Law San Francisco, is far from neutral. If you check the online reviews at JAMS, you'll see a pattern of people saying that their rights were violated, they didn't get justice, the arbitrator never heard them, never listened, sided with the employer. And it's like, dang, all right, that's not very promising. You also see articles where JAMS was used to defraud victims and take money from victims. You'll see articles where JAMS arbitrators lied on their resumes. So this organization is far from neutral. And there's a reason why your employers want you to go to arbitration, because they know that it's a privatized hearing. So most of the papers are private. Most of what happens in arbitration is private. Arbitrators can violate your rights with impunity. they will often side with the employer. I received a packet from JAMS upon the initiation of arbitration, and in over 1,000 cases that they had heard, only like 8 times the employee was victorious. That's not by chance. That's the program. Think about it. You work somewhere, right? And you have a dispute with your employer. Your employer pays JAMS, the mediation company, to mediate all the claims, right? So JAMS is seeing a bunch of money from your employer. JAMS is now incentivized to ensure that your employer never has to pay out money to the employees, because I mean, if JAMS rules against the employer, then the employer may drop JAMS as their mediation company. And in my case, JAMS was something else. We get to arbitration after David Greenhouse in New York fights to get the case remanded back to arbitration. And when we get there, the LA attorneys at Pillsbury, Paula Weber and Alexander Morton, indicate that arbitration isn't the proper jurisdiction and my case should be dismissed. Y'all fought to get me here. I show up here and now you guys tell me that you want my case dismissed. You literally can't make this up. Like, this is what happened. Upon arbitration, Mr. Aragaki cut down my witness list by a lot. He said that there wouldn't be enough time to question and or depose everybody on my witness list. And I was like, you're depriving me of a fair trial. Extend the hearing date. Like, if you're saying there isn't enough time to question and or depose people on my witness list, why are we here? He cut down on my causes of action, and he essentially gave the Pillsbury attorneys and the Chateau Marmont whatever they want, which makes sense because, I mean, they were paying him. He was a neutral. He was bought and paid for. Hyro indicated that he didn't have jurisdiction over Andre Balaz in the arbitration agreement. Hyro indicated that there would be no motion practice in arbitration. He allowed it all. He allowed them to try to paper us to death. Fortunately, we were able to respond to everything. They tried to get the case dismissed in arbitration, even though they forced me to come back to arbitration. And while they were doing all this, the Chateau Marmont wasn't paying their bills to JAMS on time. An invoice was submitted for, I believe, almost $72,000, and it was 2 months late. Now, there's a California statute, 1281.98, that says if a bill is submitted, essentially, you have to pay that bill within 30 days. Now, the bill was submitted to the Chateau, I believe, 60 days prior, and on the invoice, it was due upon receipt, meaning the moment they got the invoice, the payment was due, but they hadn't paid. So a JAMS representative comes on a thread with my attorney and says, hey, touching base about that payment. At that point, it's like, wait, what you mean touching base? They ain't been paying y'all? At that point, my attorney and I get together and we go through the statute, and it gives you the right to unilaterally withdraw your case from arbitration and go to court if that bill isn't paid. So we do just that. And chaos happens when we do that. At that point, Alexander Morton comes on the thread and he writes the arbitrator and says, you know, that had I met and conferred with them, I would realize that I was wrong about them not paying, and they paid their bill. And I'm just trying to get out of arbitration. This is a means of escaping. Paula Weber echoes his sentiments. I mean, they are popping off. So JAMS comes on the chat. Kimberly Lowe is a member of the JAMS National Arbitration Committee. In her notice to all parties, September 28, 2022, she says everything we needed to hear. She says, dear parties, JAMS has received and reviewed the parties' various correspondence regarding the above referenced matter. Please note the following. On August 5th, 2022, JAMS issued an invoice number 6279160, for the arbitration hearing fees in the amount of $71,400 in accordance with California Code Civil Procedure Section 1281.98. This invoice was issued due upon receipt and emailed to all parties on the matter on the same date. Now, she says a bunch of other word salad to try to dance around the fact that they issued that invoice with the statute and it was due upon receipt. And Pillsbury and Chateau, you guys didn't pay that bill, so you violated the statute. So Alexander Morton, Pillsbury attorney, writes Hyro a letter and indicates that that JAMS has now submitted this confusing letter. And Paula Weber says that the due upon receipt was in small text at the bottom of the invoice. Meanwhile, she wrote and published an entire article on Pillsbury's site about this very same statute that she's now acting as though is news to her. You can't make this up. So JAMS essentially says, yeah, they didn't pay on time, but they've now paid so we can move forward with arbitration. Ma'am, there is no moving forward. They violated the statute. Now, Paula Weber gave Hyro marching orders of what he needed to write because we withdrew from arbitration and we went back to the Southern District of New York and we presented the documents to Judge Schofield. So he came on the thread and he wrote this letter and said that I implied consent. I'm sorry? How does one imply consent? You understand the dangers of saying someone implied consent? For context, let's say you use implied consent in a more severe scenario. You understand how dangerous that is? But what Hyro wanted was that payday that he was going to get for the hearing. He was going to make, I believe, $9,000 a day for the hearing. So Hyro says that I implied consent. Then he goes into it and he starts to question my character and says that I'm avoiding arbitration. And the Pillsbury attorney sent this letter to David Greenhouse and he submits it. I'm willing to bet that letter prejudiced me in the eyes of Judge Schofield, and it shouldn't have because she had my documents. But after that, it was over for me with her. So she comes on the thread. She says, in New York, that California law isn't the controlling law in her courtroom. This is a California arbitration, a California employer. You sent me back to California to arbitrate, but now that I get here to withdraw my claims, you say that California law isn't controlling in your courtroom. Well, if it wasn't controlling in your courtroom, you got my complaint. You knew that it was a California employer. Why didn't you refuse to take on the case? It's not what you did. You allowed Hyro Aragaki, the arbitrator, to paint me in a light that is so blasphemous. You mean to tell me I've spent 30 plus years of my life, no criminal record, no accusations of anything, built a reputation, been in the face of many brands, done right by a lot of people. You mean to tell me I now decide, you know what? Forgive me, being a good person. Let me show up in arbitration and essentially show my butt. I'm not speaking disparagingly of a judge, but these people they're deemed honorable people and they take these oaths and they're supposed to be fair and without bias and not prejudiced. And that's not what I think that I got here. So this isn't an attack. This is more about holding people in those positions accountable and wanting a certain level of transparency, because you all make decisions as judges that can ruin someone's life. I end up back in arbitration. Now, also in Hyro's letter that was submitted to Lorna, he says that when I come back to arbitration, I won't be able to testify as it pertains to my mental health and or submit documents, medical documents, toward my mental health. So essentially went on the record and said that he would punish me and he would deprive me of a fair hearing. On the record, he wrote this. And the judge saw this, and it's almost as though Judge Schofield felt as though my case was beneath her. I understand she deals in bigger cases, fraud cases, criminal cases, but I shouldn't be deprived of a fair hearing because you feel as though this is beneath you. It's a painful thing to experience, man. So I get back to arbitration and my health starts to take a toll on me. My mental health is already very fragile. And in August of 2022, my lung fully collapses. And when it happens, I don't know what's going on, but I'm having difficulties breathing. So I drive myself to the hospital. They run a bunch of tests, do blood work. Everything comes back clear and clean. And the doctor's like, we're just going to run a CAT scan to see if anything's going on in your chest. And when the CAT scan is ran, within minutes, I'm in an emergency surgery for a lung collapse. A surgery that I had to be awake for because the doctor needed verbal confirmation that I could indeed breathe. And the medical term for my collapse is spontaneous pneumothorax. And the procedure is the most painful thing that I have ever experienced. Nurses had to come hold me down because I was going crazy. Doctor numbed my chest and he took this medical tool and he put it in my chest and he was stabbing me to get the air out. I hadn't yelled like that in ever.
Oh my God. Oh.
So he did it and he told me to take a deep breath and I took a deep breath and I could breathe. And he was like, oh, okay, good. And I was like, all right, you guys gonna stitch me up and I get to leave? And he chuckled. He was like, no, you're going to the ICU. We have to put a tube in your chest and monitor you. And I was like, for how long? He was like, we'll see what happens. And I was like, what?
It's the most painful shit I've ever experienced in my life. I'm a strong person. As emotional as I can be. I don't show much emotion, but mentally, physically, this has exhausted me, man. Wow.
So I ended up being in the ICU, intensive care for 2 weeks. And if you've ever been in the ICU, you're surrounded by people in comas, people on breathing machines, people on essentially their last leg. And while I was in there, a few people coded and didn't make it. So that was just a tough thing to experience. And all I wanted to do was get out of there. During this time, my attorney reached out to Pillsbury attorneys and asked if we could stay the arbitration until I healed from my surgery and my lung collapse. They denied it. Paula Weber and Alexander Morton denied the stay and said that it wasn't a serious enough injury to warrant a stay. Hira Aragaki agreed and Jams backed him. I just remember my attorney calling me and he FaceTimed me. And he had tears in his eyes, and I was like, what's going on? And he was like, they're refusing to stay the hearing, and I'm so sorry. And I was like, they really think I'm less than a human being. That just further took a toll on my mental health. I got out of the hospital, thank God, but I'm still healing. So my surgeon wrote a letter on my behalf and said I needed at least 2 months from me, leaving the hospital to be healed somewhat. And I submitted this signed document from a surgeon to Hiro, refused to stay the arbitration. So we're going through arbitration. My mental health is in a bad place. I'm actively healing from a lung collapse. And I get in a car accident, a hit and run in November of that same year that leaves me with several herniated discs in my neck and my back, a ligament tear in my knee, which put me down for months. And so my attorney reaches out to opposing counsel for the Chateau Marmont and lets Hira Aragaki know that I was in a car accident and that we need to stay the case. And at this point, we're nearing the actual arbitration hearing, and Hiro denies the stay and has me submit documentation. I submit the crash report from the police officer. I submit documents from my primary care physician that list the lung collapse, and my blood pressure was through the roof, and I was dealing with anxiety. I was on psych medication at this time via cerebral. I had letters from several physicians. I had a note from the cerebral nurse practitioner. So I submit all these notes, and Hiro comes on and challenges the credentials of the medical professionals who wrote me the notes. So he said nurses and nurse practitioners aren't physicians, which is mind-boggling to me. Because when I was in the hospital, I dealt with nurses and nurse practitioners more than I dealt with anybody. They were the backbone of not just my care, but the care of everybody else. So for Hiro and Jams to feel as though nurse practitioners aren't physicians, that is troubling and problematic. Here you have a man with a law degree saying that people with medical degrees aren't real professionals and or real physicians or doctors, physicians specifically. He refuses to stay the hearing, and at this point, my mental health is fragile. I'm in pain. Like, I have several notes, and I went to physical therapy a few times. This is before they knew how serious the injuries were, and they had to shift my treatment because of my lungs, so we couldn't do anything too crazy because I'm still healing from a lung collapse. And once the MRI came through and the surgeon saw the damage, surgery was scheduled, and I ended up having surgery on my neck, my back, and my knee. And Hiro said that these weren't serious injuries and I was making them up. So the hearing is approaching. I got herniated disc. I'm healing from my lung, and I'm just going through it physically and mentally. I have a mental breakdown. And I am involuntarily institutionalized under the Baker Act. And it's a 72-hour hold that you don't have a say in. And as a result, I missed the arbitration hearing. And Hiro says that I deliberately missed the hearing, and he rules against me and in favor of the Chateau. So I never had a hearing on the merits. Claims were never heard. And after the fact, when we wrote Jams and indicated that, there are further medical records, he said the time had passed to submit medical records. So this was a man on a mission, because according to him, the hearing date had been set, and due to his schedule, he couldn't accommodate shifting it. So in essence, Hiro has said that his schedule was more important than one's health. And that's what I mean by arbitrators are incentivized to do the right thing and rule in favor of the employer. So Hiro awards the Chateau Marmont, and in the process, Hira Aragaki sanctioned my attorney and I in arbitration due to me amending a complaint and him not liking what the complaint said. He deemed the amended complaint frivolous. Meanwhile, there are certainly labor law violations that I now can wholeheartedly prove because I went to the Labor Department and they encouraged me to pursue my claims in court, because it was never heard in arbitration. So Hiro sanctions my attorney and I. When we were sanctioned, what's interesting is Alexander Morton and Paula Weber from Pillsbury Law had a sidebar with my attorney and presented him a deal and said that they would waive the sanctions if he got me to dismiss my claims with prejudice. And my attorney, being a decent human being, came to me and said, hey, this is a deal they presented to me. I can't represent you anymore. And I said, you can't, because there's a conflict. So I ended up becoming a pro se litigant, self-represented. I was representing myself. And while in arbitration, I learned that the Chateau Marmont has hired a PR firm spearheaded by PR executive Bill Harrison. And the Chateau is planning to run a smear campaign in the media and say that I lost in arbitration and that I was punished and all my claims were frivolous and fraudulent, to paint the Chateau as a well-to-do establishment and to vindicate Andre Balazs of his wrongdoings. So this word gets back to me. Somebody that I know gets in touch with one of the publications that they were shopping the story to on email and submits documents that show the contrary, to show that it's not over, to show that they've been lying and the arbitrator is compromised. So this journalist emails Bill Harrison with my team CC'd on email and said, hey, Bill, what is this email you sent me with all these documents? This doesn't prove that the case was decided against Jules and that he was punished and the arbitrator punished him. I'm guessing the journalist thought my person was a part of Bill Harrison's team, so he didn't remove my source. And Bill comes on the thread and says he'll, double back with his point of contact to see what's going on. So I was able to stop a smear campaign because I caught it, but they were going to run a smear campaign, which would have virtually ended me in Hollywood. And we took this to arbitration, and the arbitrator, because we both signed a protective order, and the arbitrator said that they weren't shopping anything and it was in fact me shopping. He blamed me. Hyro blamed me for everything, even though I had caught them with their pants down. But again, they were paying him, so he was merely doing his job. Yeah, that was arbitration. So Hyro submitted his final award. David Greenhouse then wrote Judge Schofield a letter and indicated that I didn't show up to my first day of the hearing, even though he knew that I was institutionalized and I couldn't make my first day of the hearing. He and my attorney didn't submit a joint letter. He just said, I'm going to do what I want to do. And that was what they were able to do in New York. Like, Paula Weber and Alexander Morton were able to literally practice in New York absent being admitted within that jurisdiction. And when I brought it up to Judge Schofield, she again dismissed everything that I had to say. And my attorney came on the record. He was still representing me at the time and said, well, no, he didn't not show up. He was institutionalized and he was dealing with documented mental health and physical injuries that prevented him from showing up, and it was dismissed by the arbitrator. But at this point, Judge Schofield, she didn't care. And in the process, now I had been seeing Cerebral. I had one really good prescriber at Cerebral, Tracy. Tracy was amazing. She saw me, she heard me, she felt for me. She knew what I was going through in arbitration. She had the documentation, and she just was like, this is just a miscarriage of justice, and I'm so sorry you're going through this, but I want to ensure that your mental health allows you to get through this. And she ended up no longer being with the company. And what I later learned is Cerebral was firing people left and right. It was a bloodbath. They were just letting people go. Every other week, it seemed as though my care team would change. Like, I would build a rapport with these individuals, and I'd wake up the next week and I had a whole new care team, and Cerebral wouldn't say anything to me. And I emailed them and said, hey, this is bad for my mental health too, and that I build a rapport with these people and I build trust, and then you just change them without asking me. And every time I'd get like new prescribers and they would learn about what I was dealing with, they would just up the dosage in the drugs that they gave me. So I was on heavy psych drugs, which, you're on these happy pills, right? And when the dosages are decent, you're like, all right, I'm moving around, I'm feeling better. But as the dosages went up, it's like, I'm more depressed than I was when I started the medication. Like, I started putting on weight. Certain parts of my body didn't work, but I was on these medications like crazy. So I was in a funk like I had never been in my life. Life was lifing, and life was happening around me. We were coming out of a pandemic. You lose people that you love. My lung collapse, car accident, herniated disc, like so much is going on up top. And so Hyro had indicated that he needed notes from mental health professionals, even though I submitted notes, but he wanted specific language. And when I went to these professionals, they all said to me, I'm not writing this one because the letter that I provided you does suffice. Two, this is intrusive and you have rights as a patient. And Cerebral stopped responding. I sent him the orders from Hyro and Jams, where he deemed them a fraudulent company and said that their professionals were essentially frauds, were unlicensed and weren't physicians. So they knew that I was in arbitration with Jams. What I didn't know is that Jams was the company that Cerebral used to mediate claims at Cerebral. So they were in business together. And I'm like, imagine you paying a company like Jams, and behind the scenes, they're telling people that you're a fraudulent company and a fraud, and your professionals aren't licensed and they're not physicians. So I find a high-level executive at Cerebral, and I see her on the email, Jessica Muse, I believe her name is. She never responds. So I go to Jams and say, hey, this is a clear-cut conflict. You're saying that Cerebral is fraudulent and the documents that I submitted from them is fraudulent, but you guys work with them. You guys are their arbitration company. So Jams comes on and says they didn't have to speak about the relationship. There is no conflict, blah, blah, blah. But what Jams doesn't know is that I now know at this point that Cerebral had fired them. So they got rid of Jams after I sent those emails. They tried to make it seem as though it had nothing to do with me, but oddly enough, you start to get emails in proof that Hire Aragaki and Jams is saying that you guys are a fraudulent company. They had to fire them because you have to think, what about all the cases that were mediated at Jams via Cerebral? Those cases can't be legitimate because Jams didn't think they were a real company. So imagine ruling in favor of Cerebral and you think they're fraudulent. The entire system at Jams is compromised. Never go to Jams, guys. Just take my word for it. So Jams and Cerebral were in bed together. And while Cerebral was ghosting me and not responding, they were doing online searches of me. So they were not responding to my emails or communications, but they were searching me up online. That is the type of business that happens at Cerebral. They'll give you a bunch of drugs, but when you need them for your mental health for real, nothing happens. It won't go your way. It's not beneficial. I would say anybody seeking mental health, stay away from Cerebral. So yeah, that was the Cerebral and Jams conflict. There was a gym incident that also was terrible. February 1st, 2020, I was told to go to the gym, and upon arrival at the gym, I found a male guest, standing in the doorway, looking as though he had just seen a ghost. His face was completely white, and as I approached the door, he turned and looked at me. He said, I found her like this. I didn't do anything. I opened the gym door to come into the gym for a run, and I immediately called the front desk. I haven't touched her. So you hear something like this, you think the worst. I tell him to step to the side. He holds the gym door open, and I tell him, hey, I want you to remain standing at the gym door, ensuring that it's open, and you'll serve as my witness. So as I enter the room, there is this young white woman, 20s maybe, 5'2", 5'3", 105 pounds, 10 pounds maybe. She is slouched over. She's wearing a jacket and a skirt, but her skirt is hiked up. She's bare. She is fully exposed, and she doesn't look like she's breathing. I don't see her chest expanding. So immediately I think, all right, we got a dead body at the Chateau Marmont. Okay. I remain calm, and I walk over, and I grab a towel first of all, and I lay it over. I grabbed her wrist, and I checked her pulse, and my heart was beating a mile a minute, because I'm like, I pray don't be dead, don't be dead, don't be dead. And I felt a pulse, and I said, oh, okay, good. And at that point, the guest's wife rushed in the hotel gym. She just went crazy in terms of, she was very emotional. It was like a mother tending to their child. She just kept saying, baby, I know something happened to you. I know something happened to you. You're okay. I'm here for you. The young lady wasn't responding to verbal commands, but she was breathing, and paramedics show up. They take her to the hospital. I never spoke to LAPD. There was no report taken. And so I do my incident report indicating what happened. And then I later learned from Amanda Granetti, the GM, and I think this might have been a mistake, because I just went to her and I said, hey, I just want to let you know that I have a witness there that watched me do everything. I did nothing that was disrespectful, distasteful. I remained professional. My main goal was ensuring that young lady's wellness. And she said, no, Adrian, it's fine. I mean, Andre was in the gym. And I was like, Balaz? She said, yes, you're fine, sweetie, and stormed off. And I was like, whoa. So I amend my report to show that Andre Balaz was in the gym. At this point, security no longer had access to the cameras. Carly took access to the cameras, so we as security couldn't see what was going on within the property, which was odd, because it's like, we're security. If something happens, how are we able to review cameras? And I worked overnight, so it was typically just me, and management was in there overnight, so how could I review cameras? So I requested to review the cameras to Carly, because I wanted to see, when Andre Balaz entered the gym, when the young lady entered the gym. And she said, well, Amanda said this. She said, well, they were in the gym together, and Andre just gave her a cup of water and left. And I said, huh? All right, well, if that's the truth, let me just review the footage so I can make sure my incident report is as thorough as it needs to be. And she says, there is no footage. I said, why wouldn't there be footage? You mean to tell me the owner of the gym is in a hotel gym with a young lady who is rushed to the hospital, who is unconscious and fully exposed and slouched over? Why wouldn't there be footage of that? So the footage mysteriously no longer existed. So I said, woo. I ended up going to the LAPD to inquire about what happened because, again, I was concerned about the young lady. And again, I'm sensitive to finding a woman the way I found her. It just didn't look good. The LAPD, although they gave me limited information, they did confirm that she survived and she was alive and she left the hospital. I don't know her name and I'm sure she doesn't know what happened, but I'm just glad that she's okay. And that incident, like, was just like, I was like what else could go wrong? There was a National Enquirer article that came out just out of the blue, and it referenced the gym incident, and it said that there was an overdose in the gym on the date that I found the young lady. And this is before I knew that it was a overdose. So I ended up getting the call records and the paramedic records, and it listed the call as OD. But I was like, who called in OD? And Andre Blige gave her a cup of water, but there was no formal investigation. So again, when you have that much power, you have friends in very high places, and I understand that, and I understand why me even coming out with this is dangerous for me to discuss, considering the person I'm speaking about in the establishment, and he has direct lines to media outlets, and it's a risk, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. I'm a child of God. When there's evil involved, I feel as though I have an obligation to speak up about it, and in this case, that just wasn't a good scenario or situation in that gym that day. Arbitration has ended. I ended up taking Jams to court due to all the injustice, and they hired a firm, and what I learned is that an arbitrator can literally break the law and violate your rights and show up in court and not be held accountable. And that was a troubling thing because no one man or woman should have that much power. So Hira Aragaki submitted his final award, and in his final award he doubles down and indicates that I wasn't hurt, I was healthy. None of my injuries were serious enough to warrant a stay, but even if they were, his schedule was full, and a host of other lies that at this point have been disproved because you've seen the documentation. But this is a man who is influencing the minds of lawyers and future arbitrators at UC Law San Francisco, and that makes me nervous for the future of these law professionals because I have firsthand knowledge that he is unethical, he's a liar, he's someone that doesn't empathize with people, and he's bought and paid for it, and he will do whatever in the best interest of the people paying him. And that's what he is, so just beware. Allegedly. Gotta say allegedly, because you know. Hiro submits his final award. The final award is submitted to Judge Schofield in New York. I motioned to transfer the case back to California because she's indicated that California law isn't controlling in her courtroom, but again, it's a California arbitration with a California employer, and you're refusing California law. She denies my transfer request. She orders a meet and confer with David Greenhouse to discuss settlement of the issue. So I get on this call, and David Greenhouse isn't on the call. It's Paula Weber. So I say, well, Paula, what are you doing on this call? I mean, you represented him in LA, but this is New York. This is a different jurisdiction. What are you doing here? And she says, well, I have a right to be here. I said, well, where's David? Because he's who is the attorney on record. And at this point, representing myself, I'm pro se. My attorney has unfortunately had to withdraw due to the conflict created by Jams in Pillsbury. So I say, well, seeing as me and David Greenhouse are the ones that are going to have to submit this joint letter to Judge Schofield, why wouldn't he be on the call? David didn't feel as though he had the time for me. This call was almost a waste of his time. So I said, I'm getting off this call, and David Greenhouse needs to get on this call. So next day, he gets on a call, the Zoom call. He's on a call, but Paula's back on the call. And I, say, hey, Mr. Greenhouse, what's your position regarding settlement? He say, the offer stands, dismissed with prejudice, and the sanctions go away. And I'm like, no, I can't accept that. So we get off the call, we submit our joint letter to Judge Schofield, and I think that decision in itself was problematic because my former attorney was on the call as well, because again, he's being sanctioned, so he's now a part of this matter, even though he's just an attorney that was representing me. So to order me to get on the call with people that have done all this wrong wasn't the best decision, but again, I respect the courts and the court's time, so I got on the call, and of course it just backfired. So I'm guessing it blew up in Judge Schofield's face, because like, why would you have a pro se litigant, his former attorney, opposing counsel, get on the call to discuss settlement when you knew where opposing counsel stood? So it just went left, and I think that might have upset her even more. But I didn't do anything. I got on the call. David Greenhouse motioned to confirm the award in New York, and we had to submit our briefs. And in submitting my briefs, Judge Schofield granted Paula Weber and Alexander Morton admission into New York. So now I had Jackson Lewis and also Pillsbury that I was going up against as a pro se litigant. I wrote the courts and I opposed their admission, and she denied it and said there was no reason not to admit them. But it's like, I brought it to your attention that they had been practicing in New York months prior, and you said that I didn't prove it. If they hadn't been practicing, why would they need to be admitted now if David Greenhouse was the attorney on record and Jackson Lewis was there? She didn't care, man. She just didn't care. So they motioned, and Judge Schofield granted them page extensions. She denied me page extensions. In fact, she cut my page count down, so I didn't have the full 25 pages to submit my motion. She attempted to speed up the time in which I had to submit my motion, and it was in contradiction of the law. So I had to literally fight for my right to be able to submit my motion. It was a lot. So Judge Lorna got that. And at this point, I knew the fix was in. I knew she was going to confirm the award, because everything leading up to that, she was literally saying yes to opposing counsel and no to me, and didn't care that I was pro se, didn't care about my injuries, didn't care about any of it. In fact, in her final award indicates that my medical records too weren't signed by a physician, which is patently false. I had records signed by doctors. Now we're in the process of appealing Judge Lorna's decision in New York. Was it a good decision? No. Was it a fair decision? No. Were there fallacies told in her decision? Yes. And again, I'm not crazy. I'm not attacking a federal judge or speaking disparagingly of a federal judge, but this is my life, and you in court documents said things that weren't true that have had major impact on me and my life. So I have to defend my integrity, defend my character, and defend me. That's what I'm doing in this appeal. And my former attorney too has to appeal, because he was sanctioned, but again, he shouldn't have been sanctioned to begin with. The sanctions were illegal, and Judge Schofield speaks about how the arbitrator couldn't sanction me due to attorney fees, so he sua sponte converted to sanctions. Like, so you're gonna speak about the illegal activity but not address it? That's what happens. Stay tuned for more. I'm back in court in Los Angeles. Pillsbury attorneys are trying to get the case dismissed so that I'm never heard, claiming res judica, indicating these claims were already heard. That's a lie. That's false. Hyro said they were frivolous. The Southern District of New York didn't know about the claims because my amended complaint was denied in arbitration. So I'm still fighting. I'm still seeking justice. Look, man, I am a tax-paying American citizen. Yes, I'm Haitian. I get it. But I don't play the game of I'm Haitian and I'm not black. No. I am a black man in America. I understand the struggles of black men in America. I speak up for the struggles of black men in America, which is why I'm doing this video. So I'm still fighting. What I do want to say is to men and women who are victims of sexual crimes, violent crimes, I pray for you. There's strength in speaking up and speaking about it. Don't let it stay within and just kill you slowly from the inside out. You got this. To everyone involved in depriving me of justice and lying, karma is a thing, and I pray that you never deal what I had to deal with, even though you aided in it happening to me. I'm gonna be all right. A lung collapse, fragile mental health, herniated disc in my neck and my back, a tear in my knee didn't stop me. So if that didn't stop me, there is no stopping me. I will get the justice that I deserve. That's the story. Now, there will be people that come out in defense of the Chateau Marmont employees that currently work there, people that frequent there, guests. And to that I say, because something didn't happen to you doesn't mean it didn't happen. And I'm big on remaining neutral until I know exactly what's going on, because I don't want to rush to judgment and then be wrong. But you have people who go out of their way to say, the Chateau doesn't do that and Andre Balazs isn't that type of person. And I'm like, not to you maybe, but to others, yes. I am not a liar. I am not a disgruntled former employee who just isn't getting his way and is losing in arbitration with frivolous claims. That's the first thing attorneys say at Pillsbury, and attorneys that represent them, these claims are frivolous. Meanwhile, it's tons of proof to indicate that none of it is frivolous. But I just hope no one at the Chateau that I have referenced calls me a liar, because what I do have is receipts, and I will release everything, because what I'm not is a liar. You can say nothing, but if you say I'm a liar, then I have to then protect my namesake, protect me as a person, protect the reputation that I've built. I know that, again, me doing this is a dangerous thing, and Andre Balaz and people at the Chateau Marmont have the power to end my career and blackball me. But I'm just at a place now where I have to get this off of my chest and out of my mind, because it's affected me far too long. So it's time to start taking the steps to move forward. And what I will say is, some people will say not everything is about race, and you're right. But in my case, everyone who deprived me of justice and all the wrongdoings were done by either white people, Asian people, or white identifying people. So while everything isn't about race, I'm willing to go out on the line here and say that in this case, race played an issue, or race played a big part in the injustice that I received within the justice system and in arbitration for sure, but also the racism that I had to deal with at the Chateau Marmont. I mean, what I will say is, you have white former employees who went on the record and spoke about the racism at that establishment. So it's like, it isn't a myth. Everybody knows. I had the audacity to speak up, and ever since I have, Andre Balaz and the Chateau Marmont have been trying to punish me. That's what they were pitching in their story. And what they really did was Hyro and Jams and Alexander Morton, Paula Weber at Pillsbury Law, what they did was they dismissed my evidence mental health claims. They dismissed a lung collapse, herniated disc, a tear in my knee, a mental health collapse. They dismissed it, and far too often the mental health of not just black men but men period is dismissed. And this isn't an attack at anybody. We go through things and we don't talk about them. But in my case, I talked about it, and people still told me that what I was saying didn't move the needle with them. It didn't resonate. But I'm here, I'm finding light, and I'm fighting, and I will continue to fight and tell my story. I understand I'm going up against the machine, but it's David versus Goliath. I appreciate y'all, everybody that's reached out since I released my initial video. I thank you. Your words mean the world to me. That's it. Y'all take care.